In 1870, in the rural town of Warrensburg, Missouri, a farmer named Charles Burden found his favorite hunting dog, Old Drum, shot dead in his yard. The culprit was his own brother-in-law, Leonidas Hornsby. Burden sued Hornsby for $50 in damages. What started as a local family grievance quickly spiraled through the magistrate court, then the district court, and eventually landed in the Supreme Court of Missouri. Both men hired high-profile legal teams to fight the battle. The defense included a future state governor and a future U.S. senator. Burden's team featured powerful political figures of their own, including David Nation, a prominent attorney whose wife, Carrie Nation, would soon become famous for smashing saloons with a hatchet. A $50 dispute over a farm dog had escalated into a high-stakes proxy war for pride and reputation. Both sides refused to back down, and the final jury trial drew an audience waiting to see who would break first. To close the case, Burden's attorney, Senator George Graham Vest, ignored the evidence entirely. Instead, he delivered a speech to the jury, stating that human families and fortunes will eventually fail us, but the dog is the one absolutely unselfish, unwavering friend a man can have in a selfish world. That single piece of courtroom rhetoric resonated so deeply with the jury, and eventually the entire country, that it cemented a phrase we all know today: a man's best friend is his dog. Vest won the case. But looking back at his speech from the perspective of modern biology, we have to ask a question. Was his famous eulogy purely the emotional manipulation of a skilled orator, or was he accurately describing hard scientific facts? To answer that, we have to look at where domestic dogs started. Long before they were household pets, their wild ancestors were solitary hunters and pack predators, relying purely on survival instincts. Vest claimed a dog will stand by a human in prosperity and poverty, health and sickness. For an animal to actually do that, it needs the cognitive ability to perceive and process complex human emotional states. This diagram illustrates a biological mechanism called cross-modal sensory integration. A dog takes in two distinct data streams at once, like the visual cue of a human's facial expression and the auditory cue of the tone of their voice. In a recent study, researchers presented downs with human faces and voices. They found the dogs could accurately match a happy human face with a positive vocal tone, successfully categorizing the internal emotional state of a completely different species. A dog's reaction to a human is driven by a highly specialized cognitive architecture. Over thousands of years, they evolved a brain explicitly designed to read human minds. Vest also spoke of a dog's constant love. Modern endocrinology provides a literal translation for this feeling. It centers on the oxytocin feedback loop. When a human and a dog make prolonged eye contact, both of their brains release a surge of oxytocin, a hormone that regulates social bonding and trust. Domestic dogs adapted to utilize the exact same chemical routing that humans use for maternal bonding between a mother and her infant. This chart shows exactly what happens physiologically when you pet a calm dog. Within minutes, the human's cortisol, the primary stress hormone, drops, blood pressure stabilizes, and dopamine spikes. At the exact same time, the dog's internal stress metrics mirror that precise drop. That intense emotional connection is a perfectly mirrored, bidirectional physiological synchronization happening inside both bodies simultaneously. At the end of his 1870 speech, George Graham Vest told the jury that when all other friends desert and riches take wings, the faithful dog remains, guarding the sleep of his master. Vest used poetry to win a $50 lawsuit. He had no way of knowing he was detailing literal, measurable biological phenomena. Canine loyalty is an incredibly successful evolutionary survival strategy. By adapting to read our expressions and trigger our bonding hormones, dogs secured shelter and food over tens of thousands of years. The cliché of a man's best friend is an ancient, tangible reality, permanently written into the DNA, chemistry. Modern society spends billions annually on accessories like tailored plaid coats, glasses, and shoes for dogs. In many urban environments, small breeds are reduced to status symbols, carried in a designer handbag as a biological ornament that simply occupies space. This raises a question about their actual status. Are dogs merely sophisticated accessories, or are they conscious members of the family? The way we categorize them dictates our ethical stance toward the rest of our natural world, defining whether we are surrounded by objects we use or subjects we respect. In the 17th century, René Descartes argued that animals were strictly objects, matter without consciousness that reacted to the world like a biological machine. This stood in direct opposition to the later work of philosopher Henri Bergson. Bergson proposed that any living being capable of making a choice possesses a level of consciousness, making them subjects rather than things. This creates a spectrum for our pets, with the utilitarian object on one end and the conscious subject on the other. Global anthropological data shows that a dog's position on this scale is often determined by their labor. Data from eHarf World Cultures identifies 5 primary functions dogs serve in human societies: hunting, defense, guarding, herding, and transport. In agricultural roles, a border collie acts as a functional tool, using specialized movements to manage livestock. In transport, dogs are used as a source of power, harnessed to carts to deliver goods through city streets. And in defense, they serve as living sensors, working alongside uniformed officers on patrol. On the surface, these jobs seem to objectify the dog, but the data reveals a paradox. The more functions a dog serves in a society, the higher their perceived personhood. Working toward a common goal doesn't turn a dog into a piece of equipment. Instead, shared labor pulls them toward the subject side of the spectrum by solidifying their place in the social unit. Dogs secured this position by evolving juvenile physical traits, mimicking the cues of human infants. These characteristics trigger the same caregiving responses we feel toward our own young. When humans and dogs interact, it activates an oxytocin feedback loop. This biological bond is nearly identical to the one that forms between a mother and her child. Roskilde University sociologists found this biological connection leads families to view dogs as human kin, using terms like baby or sibling. Even when asserting control, they rationalize their superiority as parents responsible for a subject, not masters owning an object. Once this biological bonding loop activates, the dog is no longer a thing to be used, but a being to be cared for. Detention between accessory and family is rarely a fixed choice. Our own biology constantly pulls dogs away from being objects and toward being subjects. By utilizing the concept of kinship, we've allowed a different species to cross from the animal out-group into the human in-group. Recognizing that a dog possesses agency and subjectivity, even if it's triggered by a biological shortcut, challenges the idea that only humans deserve respect. If we can see a subject in a dog, we are forced to consider the subjectivity of all other species we coexist with on this planet.